She came looking for scrap metal and solitude. What she found was a forgotten rail yard swallowed by weeds and a rusted train car welded shut from the inside. But when she pried the door open, the air changed. Light spilled from a hidden hatch beneath the floorboards, and what waited below hadn't seen daylight in nearly 50 years. Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from. And if you love stories about lost places, hidden legacies, and the people brave enough to uncover them, hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's story might just top this one. The first time Riley Harper saw the rail yard, it was like stumbling into the belly of a steel graveyard. Rows of rusted train cars stood silent in the fading morning light, their windows blacked out with time and grime. Grass pushed through the gravel like it had been trying to reclaim the place for decades, and old signage swung in the breeze, creaking with each gust. The air smelled like wet iron and oil that had long since dried. She parked her old Dodge flatbed outside the crumbling fence line, the engine sputtering before it gave a final cough. The yard hadn't been on any maps she'd looked at, not Google, not the county registry, but an old man at the salvage auction had mentioned it in passing. Out past mile, marker, 47, he'd said, where the fog hits the rails and even the birds don't sing. Riley had laughed at the time. Now, standing there, she wasn't so sure. Her boots crunched on the gravel as she stepped past the broken gate, gloved hands tightening instinctively around the strap of her tool bag. The silence was heavy here, not peaceful. Expectant. She didn't scare easy. Years spent elbow deep in engine blocks taught her not to. But something about this place felt paused, like it had been waiting for her. Each car she passed told a story in peeling paint. Some bore faded logos from train companies long defunct, others were stripped to their bones, metal, skeletons picked clean by weather and time. A few still had seats inside, or scraps of upholstery that swayed when the wind pushed through the cracked glass. Then she saw it. At the very end of the yard, half buried in weeds, was a single car, not like the others. It was newer, bulkier, and sitting on its own isolated track that curved off sharply into a grove of trees. Its paint was almost entirely gone, save for a patch of dull blue under the grime. The windows weren't broken, they were tinted black, and the door was sealed. Riley stepped closer. She ran her fingers along the metal edge. Weld marks, thick and deliberate. Whoever had shut this car hadn't wanted anyone getting in, or something getting out. She knelt to inspect the undercarriage, brushing away vines and dirt. The coupling was rusted solid, wheels looked locked. But there was no mistaking it, the whole thing had been modified. Reinforced steel plates lined the bottom. This wasn't a passenger car, it was a vault on wheels. Her breath fogged the air as she stood back up. She wasn't leaving. Not yet. Not with a mystery like this staring her in the face. She whispered, half to herself, half to the train, "What the hell were you hauling?" The sun dipped behind the trees. Shadows lengthened. And deep within the sealed car, something made a faint metallic thunk, like a chain slipping off a hook. Riley didn't flinch. She just grinned, and went back to the truck for her grinder. The grinder screamed to life in Riley's hands, its sparks briefly lighting up the gloom like fireflies trapped in a bottle. She wore a welding visor over her freckled face, the lenses darkening each time the blade kissed metal. The sound echoed through the yard, bouncing off silent train cars like ghosts weren't used to being disturbed. She didn't care. If anything, it made her work faster. The welded seam along the door was thick, too thick for a temporary seal. Someone had spent real time closing this thing up, reinforced steel, not just cosmetic plating. She switched angles, cutting low and slow, a shower of orange cascading across the gravel. Each slice revealed more of the original doorframe beneath the grime. Riley paused to let the blade cool, lowering the grinder and lifting her visor. The sky was darkening faster now, bleeding from amber to violet. Night came early in October, and the rail yard had no lights, no signs of life, not even the buzz of insects. She'd worked in silence for nearly an hour, and the door was only halfway free. She reached into her duffel for a pry bar and tested the top corner. It didn't budge. "Stubborn son of a," she muttered, jamming her shoulder against the edge. Nothing. That's when she noticed something odd, a faint warmth against the steel. Not heat from grinding, not surface warm. This was internal, like something inside was powered. Her brow furrowed. There was no way electricity still ran through this place. She hadn't seen a single wire pole connected to the yard, no substations, nothing. And yet, her palm against the car's side told her otherwise, a subtle vibration under her skin, like a generator humming somewhere far away. She stepped back, heart beginning to pick up pace, but not from fear, from adrenaline. The same kind that kicked in when a seized engine finally turned over after days of coaxing. Riley flicked on her flashlight and pointed it inside the narrow slit she'd managed to pry open along the base. Dust swirled in the beam, but beyond that, darkness swallowed everything. No furniture, no cargo crates, no signs of habitation, just a faint copper glint in the far corner, and something else. Was that a handle? She leaned in. A floor handle, half recessed beneath what looked like a welded panel. It wasn't part of the original car design, that much she was sure of. Someone had added it. Purposefully. Hidden it. Riley dropped her flashlight, hands suddenly shaking in their time gloves, because as her eyes adjusted, she realized that the copper glint wasn't just metal, it was a keyhole, and faintly glowing around its edges was light. Not daylight. Something warmer. Alive. She didn't hesitate. She yanked the pry bar again, harder, louder, until the screech of tearing metal filled the night, and with a final snap, the door groaned open just enough for her to slip through. Inside, it was silent, warm, and waiting. The inside of the train car smelled like dust, metal, and something older, ozone maybe, or memory. Riley stepped carefully, her boots echoing faintly across the narrow floor. Her flashlight cut through the dim, sweeping across bare walls and riveted ceiling panels. No seats, no benches, just a hollow shell lined with steel. The whole thing had been gutted, except for the floor. She knelt near the center of the car where she'd seen the copper glint. Up close, the trapdoor was unmistakable. A square panel flush with the metal floor, sealed at its seams and marked with a recessed handle. A ring latch, the kind you'd find on industrial hatches or storm cellars. This wasn't standard train manufacturing. Riley reached out, brushing away the thick coat of dust that had settled over it. The metal beneath was almost warm to the touch, humming softly, like it was tethered to something alive below. She leaned in and placed her ear to the panel. Nothing. Just her own heartbeat. Then, a click. Not from the hatch. From the corner. She spun, light landing on a square steel box bolted to the wall. A breaker panel? No smaller, sleeker. It had a biometric pad. The green LED blinked once, then stayed steady, casting a dull glow across the otherwise shadowed space. Her breath caught in her throat. Someone had upgraded this train. Not 10 years ago. Not even 20. This was tech from the last 5, maybe less. She crouched beside the keypad, examining it. Most of the casing was seamless, but a small square of glass in the pass in the keypad center caught her attention. A fingerprint scanner. And below that, a single word etched into a tarnished plate. Authorization. Evelyn Harper. Riley's mouth went dry. That name. She hadn't heard it in years. Not since the day her father had finally stopped answering her questions and packed away every photo in a cardboard box labeled, "Don't." Evelyn Harper was her mother. A mechanical engineer. A ghost in the family story. She'd vanished when Riley was 6, leaving behind only a few hazy memories, grease-stained hands, the smell of solder, and a lullaby hummed under breath while tinkering late at night. No one ever said where she went, just that she'd been working on something too big, and one day, she was gone. And now her name was here, burned into metal inside a welded train car, guarding a trapdoor that glowed at the seams. Riley didn't know whether to feel grief or rage or awe. Instead, she placed her thumb on the scanner. The panel chirped, access granted. The trapdoor clicked, then hissed. And slowly, like the inhale of something waking after a long sleep, the hatch began to rise. Golden light spilled out, soft and hazy, like sunlight through an old photo. And beneath it a staircase, winding downward into silence. Riley exhaled once, deeply. Then she climbed down. The air grew cooler, with each step. Riley descended, her boots echoing faintly on the spiral staircase. The metal groaned beneath her weight, not from instability, but from aged decades of silence now disturbed. The golden light intensified, not harsh like fluorescence, but warm and deliberate, designed. intentional. At the bottom of the stairs, the space opened into a low-ceilinged room. Walls of brushed steel and industrial concrete met in sharp, clean seams. No dust, no decay. Everything was preserved like it had been waiting for someone to return, or someone specific. A single overhead fixture glowed softly, illuminating a room about the size of a shipping container. Along the walls were shelves, locked drawers, racks of tools so neatly organized it almost felt sterile. In one corner stood a tall server tower, powered down, but intact. Opposite it, a workbench, completely untouched. On it sat a manila folder, a silver key, and a worn notebook with a red canvas cover. But Riley's eyes went straight to the centerpiece. In the far corner of the room stood a pedestal. On it sat a black briefcase, sleek, matte, untouched by time. A thin layer of glass surrounded it, reinforced, with a faint biometric reader glowing just beneath the surface. A yellowed sticky note was taped on the outer casing. In sharp, familiar handwriting, "For Evelyn if anything happens." Riley stared at the name, her throat tight. This wasn't some random lab, it was her mother's. Built beneath an abandoned train car like a secret no one could afford to lose or find. She turned back to the workbench, drawn by something deeper than curiosity. The red notebook had initials in the corner, stitched in thread, E.H. She opened it gently. The pages were dense with diagrams, schematics, calculations. Not just ideas, systems. Plans for something massive. Magnetic rails, propulsion systems, notes on thermal management, energy recycling. It wasn't fantasy, it was a fully realized blueprint. A new kind of train, one that could change everything. She flipped to the last page. A scribbled note read, "They won't buy it. Not because it doesn't work, but because it works too well. 5 companies, 3 visits, 1 threat. I've hidden the core schematics. If this is ever found, I hope it's by her. She'll know what to do." Riley's heart pounded. This wasn't just about an invention. It was about a truth buried beneath steel and silence. She turned back to the briefcase, hands shaking, and placed her thumb against the biometric lock. It clicked once. The glass retracted. And the briefcase, untouched for nearly 20 years, released a soft hiss, like it had been holding its breath all this time. Riley opened it slowly. Inside were 2 stacks of papers, a black flash drive, and a cashier's check. Her breath caught. $5 million. Payable to Evelyn Harper. Date, the 2nd of July 2005. Memo. Rail system buyout do not cash. Riley stared at the check, stunned. Whatever this place was, it wasn't just a lab. It was a buried war. And her mother had been at the center of it. Riley didn't cry. Not at first. She sat down on the cold concrete floor, her back to the pedestal, the briefcase still open beside her. The check lay across her lap, its yellowed edges crinkling under the tremble in her fingers. $5 million. Not cashed, not hidden in a bank or safe, just stored, like a marker of something refused, like proof of a choice. Her mother, Evelyn Harper, had been here, had built this, had walked these stairs, run her fingers along these blueprints, powered up these servers, planned something so advanced, so dangerous to someone, that it had to be entombed in steel beneath a forgotten rail line. And she had never come back. Riley reached for the red notebook again and turned to the middle pages. Most were technical, unreadable at a glance. Magnetic flux graphs, complex energy curves, circuit maps. But scattered between the calculations were short entries, personal ones. Almost journal-like. The prototypes work too well. First presentation in DC scared them. They smiled, then sent a silence offer. Said this couldn't exist. Said it would collapse the industry overnight. I walked out. They followed me home. Riley's birthday is in 2 weeks. I've bought her a telescope. She says she wants to see what's coming before it arrives. Smart girl. They came to the lab again. This time they didn't knock. Took files, backups, even the external drive. They missed the core design. I built a decoy. If I vanish... Riley, you need to know. They didn't win. They buried to it. That's different. Riley's breath caught. Her name. On paper. Written in ink by a hand she hadn't seen in over 2 decades. And suddenly all the silence in her life, the hollow answers, the cardboard box her father refused to open, The nights she lay awake wondering why felt like a dam finally breaking. Her mother hadn't left because she didn't care. She disappeared because she had to, because telling the truth would have endangered them both. Riley stood up slowly and turned to the workbench. She powered on the nearby console. The screen blinked, flickered, then whirred to life, with a deep, analog hum. A custom OS appeared, simple white text on black. Harper Core. Loaded in block letters. Below it, enter access key. She plugged in the black flash drive. The screen flashed green. A new message popped up. Welcome, Evelyn. Last login. 6,750, 3 days ago. One archived file available. Final statement. Riley clicked it, and the speakers, dusty and near silent, began to play. A voice filled the room. Clear, calm, measured, and unmistakably her mother's. If you're hearing this, then either I'm gone, or I've finally come home. Either way, this is for you, Riley. Riley staggered backward, her hand clenching the workbench edge for balance. She hadn't heard that voice in 19 years, and now, it was speaking through the walls. The speakers crackled softly, as though even the air needed a moment to adjust to the sound of Evelyn Harper's voice. It was smooth and level, but layered with exhaustion, not the kind that comes from lack of sleep, but the kind that builds from years of watching your life slip out from under you. Riley, if you're hearing this, then they didn't destroy everything. Or maybe you found what I left behind before they could. Either way, you've always been smarter than I was. Riley's hand hovered over the keyboard, but she didn't touch anything. She stood still, listening, absorbing, every syllable like oxygen. I built something they didn't want the world to have. Not a weapon, not a virus, something clean, efficient, limitless. A rail system that could replace highways, jets, even cargo ships if scaled, fully magnetic, zero fuel, minimal friction. You could go coast to coast in under 2 hours for the price of a sandwich. And they hated it. The screen displayed schematic fragments as the audio played digital drawings of track layouts, hover stabilizers, magnetic couplers, power routing circuits. Riley recognized the same hand behind them as the one that had once sketched solar cars for her lunchbox napkins. They tried to buy it. I refused. They came back with threats. I still refused. Then, they stopped asking. I knew what that meant. I built this place in secret. Hid the real schematics down here and locked it away in a place no one would bother to look, an old train car no corporation could be bothered to demolish. The voice paused. If you're standing where I think you are, it means you didn't give up on machines. Or on me. And I need to ask something of you. Riley stepped closer. Don't sell it. Don't cash that check. That money was the price of silence, a bribe I never took. It's proof. Keep it if you need to. Burn it if you don't. But the system, the design, don't let it die down here with me. The audio clicked, then shifted. A softer tone now. Personal. I'm sorry I missed your science fairs. Your first spark plug change. Your graduation. I watched what I could from shadows. But this is the only legacy I can leave you. Not just a blueprint, but a choice. Riley swallowed hard. The screen faded to black. Only one word remained, centered in blinking text. Yours. Riley sat down heavily on the steel bench. The silence afterward was deafening. Not empty, full. Like the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for her to decide. She looked down at the check again. $5 million. It could pay off every debt she had. Buy her a dozen shops. Make her life easier, safer, quieter, or... She looked at the blueprints glowing on the monitor. Or she could finish what Evelyn started. Not because she had to, but because maybe the inheritance wasn't the money. Maybe it was the mission. Riley left the vault long after midnight, the red notebook clutched tightly under her arm, and Evelyn's voice still ringing in her ears. The abandoned train yard was cloaked in silence again, the wind stirring dry leaves across the gravel. But now, everything felt different. The rusted steel, the forgotten rails, the car sealed like a tomb, none of it was random. It had been chosen, built, buried. This entire place was a crypt, not just for a machine, but for a truth someone had paid millions to forget. Back at her truck, she slid into the driver's seat and stared at the cracked dashboard for a long time. $5 million. All she had to do was walk into a bank with that check and hand over the dream. She could disappear. No one would ever know what was hidden in that train car, but her. But she already knew too much. The next morning, she drove 2 hours to the city archives, notepad in hand. She pulled property records, corporate contracts, even rail company closures. Everything about the yard had been wiped clean, no transfers, no sales, no easements. It was as if the land had vanished from history, until she found it. A line item buried in a 2004 filing, under a holding company called Transit R&D Holdings LLC. The filing was short, purposefully vague, but she recognized one of the names in the board signature block. Barrett Lund, a former executive at Axton Energy, a company that had spent billions lobbying against green transportation initiatives. Axton had gone bankrupt 5 years later. Public scandal, misuse of funds, congressional hearings. It made sense. They hadn't wanted to kill the magnetic rail system. They wanted to own it. And when Evelyn wouldn't sell, they'd buried the entire thing: technology, blueprints, even the woman who created it under corporate paperwork, and 6 inches of weld. Riley leaned back in her chair, the fluorescent lights buzzing above her. The truth was bigger than just a machine. This was about control, about silencing progress that threatened power. Back home, she opened the notebook again, studying the design sketches Evelyn had left. The system didn't need fossil fuel, didn't rely on rare earth metals. It could be built locally, sustainably. It wasn't just science fiction. It was a threat to everything the old system depended on, which is why they tried to erase it. Riley didn't sleep that night. Instead, she cleared out half her workshop, wheeled her welder out of storage, and covered the windows with old moving blankets. She drew the first full diagram on her whiteboard around 3 a.m. The railcar was still there, still untouched. She wasn't going to dismantle it. She was going to wake it up. And this time, no one was going to bury it again. The first recording startled her. Riley had returned to the underground vault with a plan: extract the design files from the flash drive, clone the server, and begin rebuilding the propulsion core piece by piece. But while combing through Evelyn's archive directories, she found something unexpected: a folder titled simply Audio Logs. No password, no encryption, just a date range: July to October 2005. The year Evelyn vanished. Riley double-clicked the first file. The room filled once more with her mother's voice, but this time, it was different. No longer measured, not rehearsed. These were audio journals, raw and unscripted. Evelyn sounded tired, worn, but alive. Day 12. I can't leave anymore. There's a car that hasn't moved across the street in 4 days. I spotted a man in the alley yesterday pretending to smoke. I think they're watching the house. The recording cut off, abruptly. Riley clicked the next one. Day 19. They tried to buy me again. 3 men. Different suits. Same script. $5 million. NDA. Full rights. I told them to go to hell. A long pause. Then, they weren't angry. They smiled. That's what scared me. Riley closed her eyes. She could see it all: Evelyn working by lamplight, looking over her shoulder, hiding pieces of the future beneath floorboards while the world above pretended she didn't exist. The third file played next. Day 30. I've sealed the train. Everything's inside. Final files. Flash drive. The check still uncashed. I added a backup copy of the blueprints behind the east wall panel. If they find me before she does, maybe she'll still have a chance. Her voice cracked. God, Riley, I hope you find this. I hope one day, the silence I left you with makes sense. You were always so curious, so stubborn. You used to ask me why I liked machines more than people. I didn't. I just understood machines. People lied. Machines told the truth. Riley sat back against the wall, the speaker still playing softly. I'm not recording these to be dramatic. I'm recording them because no one else will tell the story. And if this is how I disappear, I want at least one person to hear my voice and know I didn't walk away from her. I walked towards something worth protecting. The next file was shorter. They've stopped calling. That's worse than the threats. And the final entry: if you find this, I love you. I'm sorry I had to hide everything. But I hope you find your way, not just to the vault, but to the kind of courage I only found too late. Static followed. Then silence. Riley didn't move for a long time. The voice was gone again. The room had never felt so quiet. She stood slowly, knuckles white around the edge of the workbench. And for the first time, she felt something deeper than grief. She felt responsibility. This wasn't just a restoration. It was a resurrection. By the end of the week, Riley's shop didn't look like a mechanic's garage anymore. It looked like a launch pad. The front bay was cleared, every non-essential tool and dusty project shoved to the back. Sheets of steel lay across sawhorses. Welding sparks flew late into the night. And in the center of it all, the gutted train car now sat on reinforced supports, stripped to its frame not to erase what it had been, but to prepare it for what it would become. This wasn't a restoration. It was an evolution. She'd spent days decoding Evelyn's magnetic rail designs, and nights cross-referencing them with modern engineering techniques. The beauty of the system was its simplicity. No fuel lines, no combustion, just magnetism, balance, and precision. And now, she had access to tools her mother never had. 3D printers, open, source firmware, AI-guided prototyping. Riley wasn't just rebuilding Evelyn's vision, she was expanding it. Still, she worked alone. Mostly by choice, partly by necessity. She hadn't told anyone. Not Leo, her former apprentice. Not Mrs. Avery down at the parts shop. Not even Father Kent, who still came by once a week to wipe grease off her coffee mugs and talk about the Ministry of Torque. What could she say? Oh hey. Remember my mom who vanished 20 years ago? Turns out she built a $5M rail system beneath an abandoned train yard and asked me to finish it. No. This was something sacred. She'd gone back to the underground vault twice more, once to copy the core files from the Harper core terminal, and again to remove the final piece, a silver case labeled Stator Assembly, Gen 2. It was heavy, cold to the touch, and humming faintly even after 2 decades. She didn't know how Evelyn had built it. But it worked. And once she installed it into the underside of the rail car, something clicked, not just physically, but emotionally. Like the machine recognized its own missing piece. Late one evening, as mist rolled over the rail yard and cicadas buzzed against the fading sky, Riley stood before the car, its panels replaced, its systems humming, the new power core locked in place. She ran her hand along the cold steel, now polished and painted in a muted gunmetal gray. On the control panel, the digital interface she had built from Evelyn's sketches glowed softly. It was minimal, beautiful, and ready. She reached into her back pocket and pulled out the necklace she'd found in the vault, her mother's street. Christopher metal, the one Evelyn had once worn during late-night welding sessions. She clipped it onto the console key as a charm. Then she pressed the ignition. No engine roared, no gears shifted. Just a low hum, like thunder hiding beneath the earth. The rail car levitated an inch off the ground, and held. Silent. Balanced. Alive. Riley stepped back, heart pounding. This wasn't science fiction, it was real. And tomorrow, it would move. The fog came early. It clung to the ground in heavy folds, curling over the old tracks like a veil. The rising sun hadn't yet broken the horizon, and the town of Glenmere still slept, unaware that history was about to stir just past its edge. Riley stood alone at the rail yard, hood up, hands in her jacket pockets, watching her breath curl in the cold. The train car, her train, now hovered silently on the rails, just as it had the night before. Not a creak, not a whisper of effort. The new magnetics pulsed softly beneath it, stabilized, steady, waiting. She had spent the last 12 hours running diagnostics, triple-checking the balance, uploading the final firmware, calibrating the neural dampers and speed governors. She didn't want speed today. She wanted proof. She wanted motion. She climbed inside and took a deep breath. The interior was simple, a single pilot console, reinforced safety panels, and an exposed chassis that still smelled faintly of solder and steel. She didn't need elegance. She needed to feel the thing breathe. On the console, the street Christopher metal swayed gently on its chain. Riley reached for the ignition sequence, pressed her thumb to the biometric pad, and watched the interface flicker to life. Power stable. Track connection verified. Clearance ahead. 4.3 miles. Status. Ready. She stared at the word. It stared back. She leaned forward and whispered into the empty car, "Let's see if you were worth burying." Then she pressed start. The car eased forward. No lurch, no grind, no scream of metal, just movement smooth, silent, impossible, like a whisper traveling down a forgotten corridor. Riley felt it more than heard it, the levitation stabilizers compensating for minor dips in the rail, the magnetic couplers locking into sync. The whole system was responding like it had been waiting for her, like Evelyn's hands were still somewhere in the circuitry, guiding her. She passed the first marker at 15 miles per hour, then 25, then 30. No fuel, no rumble. Just quiet, breathless speed. The fog peeled away in sheets, revealing a silver ribbon of rail that had been unused for nearly 2 decades now, humming with life again. Up ahead, the old bridge came into view, a rusted trestle that crossed Glenmere Creek. It had once been condemned. Now, Riley had reinforced it, welded it herself, each rivet a promise. She hit the halfway mark at 37 miles per hour. And just as she passed the final marker, a figure appeared on the far end of the bridge. Tall, weathered, familiar, Benjamin Rhodes, the old conductor, Evelyn's friend. Riley had called him late last night, told him only that he might want to be there for the first run. He didn't wave, he didn't cheer, he just stood there, hat in his hands, watching. As the car eased to a stop in front of him, Riley stepped out and met his eyes. His voice cracked. "I thought they buried her." Riley smiled. "They did." Then she looked back at the silent, levitating machine behind her. "But I dug her out." She walked to the rear of the car and opened the side panel. Inside, etched onto the steel in her mother's unmistakable handwriting, was a single sentence. "This isn't the end of the line, it's the start of the next one." Riley traced the words with her fingers. The fog lifted just enough to reveal the tracks stretching ahead, unused, unwatched, and now, unbound. And in that quiet morning light, for the first time in years, she didn't feel like the girl left behind in someone else's story. She felt like the one writing the next chapter.